Welcome to Blender Frenzy. I'm Justin, and here are the top 12 new VSE features and updates in Blender 5.0, starting with the top 3 biggest updates that will have the most impact in your video editing workflow. Let's get started.
Frenzy.
In Blender 5, there are 3 huge new features that will have the most impact on your video editing workflow. And the first one is the addition of the sequencer scene. The sequencer scene is a standalone scene that can be selected and accessed apart from the active scene. This gives you the new ability to use the sequencer to collect multiple scenes all together in one timeline and quickly jump between them just by scrubbing through the timeline. So you can see there's a different scene selector here than there is up here, and I can select them individually. I have one scene that is the VSE, a VSE scene. And then the other 2 scenes are actually 3D scenes. So here's a 3D scene I made with a projection mapping on a pumpkin. You can see like that. And then the scene 3 is the demo file from the recent OK Go video using Blender, showcasing some Blender stuff here. And so what we can do is if we come back to video editing, and in our sequencer we have like a master edit. You can use edit. I like to call this master so that I understand what that's doing. Then we can add in any of the scenes that we have. We can also add assets. I'll get to that later. But if I add scene 1 and snap it here, we have to come up here to our strip properties, which are now in the properties editor, which I'll get to also a little bit later. And we have to make sure we select either camera from the 3D view or sequencer. So this one's a sequencer scene, so I want to select the sequencer. And now you can see this scene is from the sequencer. And then I can come over here to scene 1, which is that's what this is, and I can edit it here. So I can do, let's just say I want to cut here and remove this part and do this and here and come back to the master scene, and then this now should reflect that. Although it doesn't, I might need to refresh. Yeah, so refresh, and now you can see it has my cut. Now it doesn't resize it accordingly, even if I do Alt-O. So let's see, I wonder if I just click this X button and then do scene 1 again. Nope, it's still there. So what I can do is just delete that and add in another scene 1, and then this is now the proper size. So then we can do that for the next one. So just add in a scene 2 and snap it there, and then we have to make sure that this is using the proper camera for scene 2. So that's camera 1, and it looked like it was already using the proper camera, but just make sure that we have the proper camera. Here's scene 3, and this one is not the proper camera, so we need to choose camera 2, and there we go. And now you can see the proper camera. Now, one thing is, if you have a really big scene like this, you can't use material preview or rendered mode because it's just it's way too slow. So I'll show you on a simple scene like mine, but you can come up and hover over here, press N, go down to Scene Strip Display on your View tab, and then change Solid to Material Preview. And this is going to chug a little bit, and there we go. So this is pumpkin scene that I have, but you can see if I click, it takes forever for it to change frames, and it's even slower here with this huge scene from OK Go. And I'm not even going to try it because it's probably going to crash. So this is a bit of a drawback. It's still CPU rendering. GPU rendering isn't available here yet, but this is going in the right direction, and with performance updates in the future, along with adding the GPU for rendering, this should be much faster. This opens up all sorts of new possibilities, such as storyboarding, where you can edit scenes as individual shots or clips and then seamlessly put them into a master timeline. Here's how it works. So storyboarding is pretty awesome. It's the same concept as here, but let's go ahead and open up a new, and we have this storyboarding option. And it sets everything up for you, including a little template that you can do your different shots. So now we have our scenes up here. We have our edit, which functions as the master timeline, and we have shot 0, 1, and 2. Now let's start with shot 1 and shot 2. So over here, we have shot 1, which is blank. So let's go to the beginning. Once I start painting, then it's going to add a keyframe. So I'm going to select the pen tool, and with the F button, I'm going to change the radius to something like that. And then I'll just say shot 1. There we go. Now this whole thing right here is just shot 1. So you can draw your picture for your storyboard on shot 1. And then as I scrub through, once it hits shot 2, it changes to shot 2. So shot 1, shot 2. And this one, I'm just going to use the airbrush. We'll do shot 2. Okay, now if I scrub through, I can do, okay, it's blank here because again, I didn't start at the beginning. You can see I have another keyframe. So I'm just going to take this keyframe, let's collapse just so we can see the summary. Just going to take this keyframe, G to grab that, and pull that over to merge with the beginning keyframe. That way it lasts through the whole shot. Now you can see that the playhead starts over even though I'm on frame 49 here. If I Control T, I can toggle that here, frame 49, but here I'm on frame 1. And that's because I have this sync scene time checked. If I uncheck this and I scrub through the timeline, you can see not only does it not move it in shot 2, but if I scrub over shot 1, the scene doesn't change. So making this edit timeline a completely separate thing than each of the scenes. So in order to do storyboarding with the master timeline, you have to have sync scene time selected. And then you can see we're on frame 1 and frame 1 with shot 1 because shot 1 is on frame 1 in the edit timeline scene. But then if I scrub all the way over here, once I hit frame 49, it turns to shot 2 because this is now the shot 2 scene. But frame 49 on the edit scene is frame 1 on the shot 2 scene. And so that is how that works. And so if we wanted to add another one here, what we would do is Shift A, go up to scene, and then we want shot 0, 0, 0. So we want that, place that there, and that is now shot 3. It automatically added shot 0, 0 as another scene strip here. So you can keep adding on to your storyboarding and drawing your pictures of different shots or different pictures for your storyboarding workflow. And then when your storyboarding is all finished, you can actually just create your different scenes, whether they're sequencer scenes or whether they are 3D scenes. You can create each shot how you want it and edit it. Go back to your master timeline, scrub through it. And if you see something you don't like and you want to change something, you can go to that scene, make a change, and then come back to your master timeline and see that change in real time. This is going to streamline your production so much, making it so much more efficient. But be careful when rendering because this new feature also means that different tabs in the properties editor might represent different scenes. The render and output tabs will always reflect the active scene, while the strip properties and strip modifier tabs will always reflect the sequencer scene. And since all these tabs are grouped together in the same properties editor, this can be easy to overlook, especially if your active scene and your sequencer scene are different. You can identify the scene of any tab by looking at the header area of that tab. So just make sure you are changing the settings of the correct scene before rendering anything. The second biggest new feature, and my personal favorite, is the addition of the Compositor Modifier. We still have all the standard VSE modifiers, but with the addition of a new Compositor Modifier that connects the VSE with the Compositor Editor. This means we now have access to all the Compositor nodes to perform a full compositing workflow directly into our videos and images in the sequencer timeline. Here's how that works. So you've got your green screen footage here. Just select your strip and go to your strip modifiers, which is now located on the properties editor, this tab, and then hit add modifier, compositor, and then click new. And you can title this whatever you want. We can just say green screen. And then what you can do is open up a new area here, split this window, and then change this to the compositor. Now we have a new drop down over here that we can change to sequencer, and here is our group input. The group input functions just like a geometry node's group input, where it takes your original item, which in our case is now this strip, and it plugs it into the group output and the viewer. If I disconnect the group input, now we have black, and now we only see black. And so whatever we plug in here and anything we put in between here will modify the appearance of our VSE strip, just like geometry nodes and just like compositor nodes. It's kind of like having access to all of the compositor nodes with a geometry node's workflow. So to get rid of the green screen, we of course add a keying node and keying. And before I plug it in, I want to make sure I'm selecting the color. So I'm going to click the color, this eyedropper, and select our green, which pastes that exact color here. And now when we plug it in, it removes that green. And then I'm going to drag in another image of a coffee table. Okay, and then we can just resize that a little bit to fit the screen. And then maybe resize this a little bit. And there we go. We now have a robot dancing on a table. Obviously, this isn't the full workflow because we would need to add shadows and stuff. This is just a demonstration of how we could use compositor nodes in here. And there are some new nodes actually in the compositor as well, some presets. And if you come over here to creative, you have a list of presets, which is pretty cool. Also, some camera and lens effects down here, such as chromatic aberration, sensor noise, and vignette. Let's just see what chromatic aberration does here. Oh yeah, look at that. Press play, and let's do a factor of 0.5. There we go. Okay, yeah. So you can see that's just added to our robot dancer. I could do the same thing on the background strip. So let's add in a compositor modifier here. We'll say new, and we'll call this one background. We can also change the name of this to be distinct from the other one. And then here what we could do is a vignette. So we just add our vignette, plug it in right here, and look at that. Now you can change the factor and the feather. You can also transform it, scale it, and all of that stuff. Let's just try, let's do a factor of 0.5. Okay. And feather, feather seems good. Maybe 0.7. There we go. So now we've got a little vignette around our scene, which gives it a little bit more of a professional type look. And just like with any other nodes, I can select the node, press M to mute it, and you can see the difference if we go back and forth with the vignette and without the vignette. I can also disable it in the modifiers tab here. Just disable that, and that disables the entire compositor modifier. And same thing here. Disable it here. We can hide this to see that. Now, one thing to note is if we have more than one modifier on here, such as a color balance, and we do some color balance tweaking here, now we have this modifier selected and we don't see our compositor nodes down here. And this took me a while to figure out. Someone actually pointed it out to me. You actually have to have the compositor modifier selected in order to see those compositor nodes. Unless you have this pinned, you can pin this here, and then if you select other things, then the nodes will stay pinned, but that will also happen if I select other strips that don't apply to this node setup. So just make sure you understand selection and pinning of compositor modifiers and their nodes. The only drawback to this feature right now is that the current version of Blender, at the time of this recording at least, only supports CPU processing on the compositor modifier. But still, this new feature is huge and opens up a whole new world of compositing and video editing capabilities. That brings us to the third biggest update, which is the ability to mark scenes as assets and add them to an asset library. Using the same concept as any other asset in Blender, you can create and store scenes as assets now that you can pull from and reuse across projects. Here's how that works. You can use scene assets for things you want to use over and over again, such as intro titles or motion graphics. I'll show you with my intro title here. So this is what I have. and I've just set everything up in its own scene called BF Intro. And in order to make an asset, all you have to do is right-click on the icon over here, and then choose Mark as Asset. And now we have this little asset icon that's highlighted, and we can click to clear the asset, and we can mark it here as well, or right-click and we can clear it from here. Now I did the same thing to all of these. You can see all the asset icons. So I've got my intro, here's my lower thirds. So if I play this is the one I used most recently for my last tutorial, and you can see I've marked it as an asset. So to use the assets in a new file, you can just create a new file. If you don't see your scene open here, just create new or click edit from the dropdown. And then we have to tell Blender where your assets are, or where the blend files that have your assets are. So go to Edit Preferences, File Paths, and then go to Asset Libraries. And we have a default user library. And here's the blend file that you just saw with all my assets. And I've saved it in this location. So what we want to do is in our preferences, add an asset library, and then just navigate to that asset folder, and then click Add Asset Library. And now you can see the path of this asset library here. And if I click back and forth between them, you can see the different libraries. You can add as many asset libraries as you want. I also like to change the import method. You have 3 options. I like to choose Append. This essentially would just make a copy of the assets and paste them into this blend file. And if I edit it in this blend file, it won't change the original. If you only want to edit them in the original, click Link, and then packs them inside of the blend file themselves. But I don't like that because certain things can't be packed, and even if it is, it takes up a lot more space. So Append is my choice. Make sure you're saving your preferences if you don't have auto save on. And now coming back here, we can press Shift A to add in a scene. And the first time you do it, it's going to say loading assets. You can see loading asset libraries. I just have to click out and then do it again. And now you can see I have all my assets from that folder ready to go. So if I want to choose my intro, I can bring that in, boom, just like this, snap it. Now you don't see anything here because we have to change the strip properties. So just go to strip properties, and the input we want to change from camera to sequencer because it's a sequencer scene. If this was a 3D scene, we would want to choose camera, and then you would want to choose whichever camera corresponded with your 3D scene. But we want sequencer, and now if I press play, it plays the exact same scene that I saved as BF Intro. Now something else you want to note here is that the edit scene, if we go to output properties, the frame rate is 24 frames per second. But if we change this to our intro, we have 30 frames per second. So we just need to make sure that these match. So going back to my edit, I'm going to change this to 30 frames per second. And now our sound and everything is going to align up just right. And again, you can add in as many scenes as you want. I'm going to just choose this overview here and put it right under here. Let's go back to our properties, sequencer, and now we can play. This was supposed to be a Halloween tutorial, but I want to also make sure our BF overview in our properties is 30 frames per second. Just make sure that they match. So going back to our edit, now we can go. This was supposed to be a. And if I select sync scene time, if I scrub, the playhead is over our BF intro, which changes this up here to our BF intro. And then if I switch this and it's hovering only over their BF overview, now this automatically changes. So you can see if I switch back and forth between those, that is how that works. So with the addition of a separate sequencer scene, a new compositor modifier, and the ability to create and store scenes as assets, these 3 new features alone bestow upon the VSE tremendously much more power than it previously had. But of course, that's only the top 3. We've got 9 other updates to go, and just know that these are not all the updates, and me picking them as a part of the top 12 is somewhat subjective. Having said that, here they are in no particular order. Update number 4. Strip properties and modifiers have now been moved from the sequencer properties to the main properties editor. This is a great move because it not only makes more sense, but you can also expand these properties all the way down to get more real estate on the screen. This is what I did previously, but it required somewhat of a hack to achieve. but now it's built in and way easier to do. Just remember, like I said before, make sure you know which scene each tab is referencing. Number 5, Prefetch Frames has been updated. The option to prefetch frames is now turned on by default, and it has also been moved. It used to be on the View tab of the Preview region, but it has now moved down to the Sequencer Properties Cache tab. This definitely makes more sense because that's what prefetching frames does. It stores them in cache. Prefetching frames can also now be controlled with the preview range. And lastly, it is now loop aware, which you can see here. Number 6, the sequencer now has a new footer region with its own playback and frame range controls. This is great because it removes the need for adding a separate timeline area for controlling that playback. Now you don't need to pull out a separate area for this, which saves on real estate. Number 7, new sequencer tools in the toolbar. First, we have new circle and lasso selection tools for additional modes of selecting strips in the timeline. We also have a new slip tool for slipping the contents within a strip. This, along with the blade tool, is especially helpful for editing on a tablet. Number 8, we now have the ability to add individual images in bulk, and this is awesome because previously when importing images as bulk in the VSE, Blender would automatically recognize these as image sequences. This created a problem if you wanted to import all of the images individually. The workaround was, after you had imported the image sequence, you could select it and press Y to separate each frame into its own strip. But this solution wasn't ideal because the newly created strips' names and source were inherited from the image sequence as a whole, not from the original images themselves. But now when performing a bulk import, we have the option to not detect an image sequence in order to have each image imported individually. This behavior did already exist in the image editor, but has now been implemented in the VSE as well. Number 9, strip modifier functionality has been enhanced. The old drop-down menu to add a modifier has been changed to an add button that now brings up a pop-up menu with search and submenu functionality that, according to the release notes, can be extended also to use assets in the future. Strip modifiers themselves can now be dragged and dropped just like 3D modifiers can. Up until now, it only had the old arrow buttons that you had to click for moving up and down the stack. And also up until now, strip modifiers didn't have any sexy icons. Well, now they do, and they look so smooth. Smooth modifier. Number 10, strip handles now clamp to contents and do not extend past their containing media. But don't worry, you can unclamp by pressing C, which will revert back to the old behavior. Moving on to the preview editor, number 11, you now have the ability to copy and paste strips right in the preview region with Ctrl-C and Ctrl-V. Previously, copying and pasting strips could only be achieved in the sequencer timeline, and by default, the strips were pasted directly above the copied strip in the preview. But now you can copy and paste right in the preview, and pasting is now centered to the mouse cursor by default. You can still bypass this if you so choose, and paste it directly over the copied strip by pressing Ctrl-Shift-V. And last but not least, number 12, you now have the ability to add keyframes directly within the preview region. Previously, you could only add keyframes in the Strip Properties tab, which took the focus away from any motion graphics animation and slowed the process down. But now, you can keyframe directly in the preview, and if you have the pie menu on drag enabled in the preferences, which you can find by going to Edit, Preferences, Key Map, you can then click and hold I in the preview to pull up the pie menu to add keyframes like that. This has the potential to really speed up the motion graphic animation workflows. So there you go, the top 12 new VSE features and updates in the newly released Blender 5.0. Again, these are somewhat subjective and are definitely not the only updates. If you want to see all the updates, head on over to the developer release notes. I'll leave a link to it in the description. In the meantime, happy editing, and you'll see me in the next one.